My son was in the ICU after an accident when my wife called and said, "Tomorrow is my cousin's birthday. Make sure you help prepare." I replied, "I can't. This isn't the time." She shot back, "If you don't come, I'll file for divorce." I hung up and deleted her number. On the day of the party, my son woke up and said, "Dad, I got hurt because Mom." I thought I understood betrayal. I thought I knew heartbreak. But nothing in my 42 years on this earth could have ever prepared me for the sickening truth. The two people I loved most in the world had conspired to kill my son. My name is Vincent Morrison, and my life was built on three unshakable principles: loyalty, family, and consequences. For years, I'd run a private security firm, specializing in protecting high-profile clients. That work taught me to read people like open books, to trust my gut above all else. My imposing height and steely gray eyes intimidated many, but those closest to me knew the fierce protectiveness that drove every decision I made. 12 years ago, I met Linda Hartwell at my brother's wedding. She was the maid of honor, radiant, charming, with auburn hair that seemed to capture every ray of light and a laugh that pulled everyone into her orbit. Linda worked as a physical therapist back then, helping accident victims rebuild their lives. It was that compassion, that apparent dedication to healing, that first drew me to her. Our courtship was swift, intense. Within 8 months, we were married in a ceremony Linda insisted be extravagant, far beyond my practical nature. But I wanted her happy. 2 years later, our son Mason was born. A bright-eyed boy who inherited my analytical mind and Linda's quick wit. I truly believed I'd built us a life most people could only envy. Our home in Riverside Hills had every luxury Linda desired. I even encouraged her to leave physical therapy once Mason was born, wanting her to have the freedom to pursue anything that made her happy. She took up tennis, joined the country club, and immersed herself in the social circles of suburban wives. But over the last 2 years, I started to notice changes. Linda grew distant, always checking her phone, stepping away for hushed calls. She spent more and more time at the country club, often returning well after dinner with elaborate, vague explanations about charity events or women's group meetings. Her affection for both Mason and me cooled, replaced by a kind of irritated tolerance. My business instincts, honed over decades, whispered warnings, but I silenced them. This was my wife, the mother of my child, the woman who'd promised to stand by me through everything. I chose to trust rather than investigate, a decision that would soon prove to be the single greatest mistake of my life. Then, the world shattered. It was a Tuesday evening in October. Mason had been riding his bike in our neighborhood when a speeding car struck him at the intersection near our home. The call came while I was reviewing security protocols with a client. The words critical condition and emergency surgery ripped through me. I drove to the hospital, my hands trembling for the first time in years, my mind cycling through every worst-case scenario. Mason, my brilliant 10-year-old son, who wanted to be a detective, just like his dad, was fighting for his life. The doctors explained severe head trauma, internal injuries. The next 48 hours would be crucial. I called Linda immediately. Voicemail. I tried 3 more times during that harrowing first night as Mason underwent surgery after surgery. Each time, no answer. It wasn't until the next evening, nearly 24 hours after the accident, that Linda finally appeared. She rushed into the ICU waiting room in a tennis outfit, her hair perfectly styled, not a trace of the frantic worry I would have expected from a mother whose child was fighting for his life. Her explanation, a spa retreat with friends, no cell service, struck me as odd. But in my exhaustion and fear, I pushed the doubts aside. I wanted to believe her. Now, on the 3rd day, I sat beside Mason's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, connected to machines that kept him alive. Something cold began to settle in my own chest. Linda had left the hospital that morning, claiming she needed to handle some urgent matters at home. She barely touched Mason's hand, barely glanced at the monitors tracking our son's fragile hold on life. I studied Mason's pale face, so young, so peaceful, despite the trauma his small body had endured. Mason was all that mattered now. Everything else, every doubt, Every warning sign I'd ignored could wait. But deep in the recesses of my mind, Vincent Morrison was beginning to compile a list of questions that would soon demand answers. The call came on the fourth day, just as the afternoon light was beginning to fade through the hospital room windows. I'd been reading to Mason, hoping my voice might somehow reach through the sedation and medical haze. The doctors had cautiously mentioned he was showing signs of improvement, but he remained unconscious. Vincent? Linda's voice on the phone carried that particular tone I'd learned to recognize, the one she used when she wanted something and expected compliance. How is he? She asked, though she didn't wait for a complete answer before continuing. Listen, I need to talk to you about something important. I glanced at Mason's still form, the bandages around his head, the 4 lines threading into his small arms. I'm here with our son, Linda. Whatever it is can wait. No, it can't wait. Tomorrow is my cousin Belle's birthday party. It's been planned for months, and I need you to help prepare. The whole family will be there. Anne. Something snapped inside my chest. Are you serious right now? Don't take that tone with me. I know Mason is your priority, but life doesn't stop because of this. Belle specifically asked for you to handle the photography setup. You know how good you are with cameras. My voice dropped to a dangerous quiet that anyone who truly knew me would have recognized as a warning. Our son is in the ICU. He nearly died 3 days ago. He's still unconscious. And you're talking about a birthday party. The doctor said he's stable now. And honestly, Vincent, you sitting there staring at him isn't going to make him wake up any faster. This family event is important to me. Belle has always been like a sister to me, and missing her 30th birthday would be unforgivable. I closed my eyes, trying to process what I was hearing. In 12 years of marriage, I'd seen Linda's selfish tendencies, her need to be the center of attention, her talent for making every situation somehow about her. But this was beyond anything I'd imagined. I can't, I said simply. This isn't the time. There was a pause. When Linda spoke again, her voice had turned cold, calculating. Vincent, I'm not asking. I'm telling you, if you don't come tomorrow and help make this party perfect, I'll file for divorce. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because of the threat itself, but because of what it revealed about the woman I'd married. Standing in that sterile hospital room, watching machines keep my son alive, I finally saw Linda with perfect clarity. She was threatening to destroy our marriage unless I abandoned our critically injured child for a party. Let me make sure I understand, I said, my voice carrying a deadly calm that would have terrified anyone who truly knew. Me? You're threatening to end our marriage unless I leave our son's bedside to help you with party decorations. Don't be dramatic. He's sedated anyway. He won't even know you're gone. That was the moment. The precise instant when my love for my wife died completely, replaced by something far more dangerous. I'd built my career on reading people, on understanding their motivations and capabilities. And in that moment, I finally understood exactly who Linda was. Without another word, I ended the call. Then, with deliberate precision, I deleted her number from my phone. I turned off the device entirely and placed it in my jacket pocket. Whatever Linda chose to do next, whatever threats she made or actions she took, I was done. I pulled my chair closer to Mason's bed and took his small hand in my own. It's okay, buddy, I whispered. Daddy's here. Daddy's not going anywhere. The next evening, as Linda was presumably celebrating at her cousin's party, I remained exactly where I belonged. I spent the day talking to Mason, reading his favorite books aloud, and researching every detail of his treatment with the focused intensity that had made me successful in business. I'd also made some phone calls, not to Linda, but to contacts in my network. People who specialized in investigations. People who could find answers to questions I'd been too trusting to ask before. Because Vincent Morrison was many things, protective, ruthless when threatened, and absolutely relentless when someone harmed his family. But he was not, and had never been, a fool. He'd simply chosen to love and trust his wife, despite the warning signs. That choice was over now. The man who would emerge from this hospital room would be someone Linda had never truly known, and someone she would come to fear with every fiber of her being. Midway subscribe line asterisk by the way, if you're still with me on this unbelievable journey, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, there are more stories of loyalty, betrayal, and unexpected justice coming your way. Mason's eyes fluttered open on the sixth day, just as the morning sun cast golden rectangles across the hospital floor. I'd been dozing in the uncomfortable chair beside his bed when I heard the soft whisper of my name. Dad. I was instantly alert, my heart hammering as I leaned forward to take his hand. I'm here, son. I'm right here. Mason's voice was weak, his words slightly slurred from the medications, but his eyes were clear and focused. The accident. I remember. Don't worry about that now, I said gently, pressing the call button for the nurses. You're safe. You're going to be okay. But Mason shook his head slightly, wincing at the movement. Dad, I need to tell you something about Mom. Something in his tone made my blood run cold. Mason, you don't need to. I got hurt because Mother told me to go to the store. Mason's words came out in a rush, as if he needed to get them out before he lost the courage. She said she needed medicine for her headache, but she couldn't go because Uncle Trevor was coming over. My world tilted. Trevor Morrison. My own younger brother. Mason's uncle. The man who'd been best man at our wedding. Uncle Trevor? Mason nodded, tears forming in his eyes. I wasn't supposed to tell. Mom said it was our secret that Uncle Trevor was helping her with a surprise for you, but Dad, they were kissing and touching each other like married people do. The machines around Mason's bed seemed to fade into white noise as I processed what my son was telling me. Linda and Trevor. My wife and my brother. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound could have. Mom sent me to get medicine so they could be alone, Mason continued, his young voice carrying a guilt that no child should ever bear. I was supposed to take the bike path, but I was upset and took the shortcut through the street instead. That's when the car hit me. My hands clenched into fists, but my voice remained gentle for my son's sake. Mason, listen to me carefully. None of this. None of it is your fault. Do you understand? Mason nodded, but I could still see the weight he was carrying. I heard them talking before I left. Uncle Trevor was mad about something. Said he was tired of hiding. Mom was crying and saying she needed more time. The final pieces clicked into place in my mind with crystal clarity. Linda's recent distance, her mysterious phone calls and lengthy absences, her complete lack of emotional response to Mason's accident, the spa retreat excuse that had never quite made sense, and now the ultimate insult. Threatening divorce if I didn't abandon our injured son to help her maintain appearances at a family gathering. A nurse entered the room, followed quickly by Dr. Patricia Wells, who began examining Mason with gentle professionalism. I stepped back, giving them space, but my mind was racing far beyond the hospital room. Remarkable recovery, Dr. Wells murmured as she checked Mason's pupils and reflexes. The swelling has reduced significantly, and his cognitive responses are excellent. We'll want to keep him for observation for another few days, but this is very encouraging. I nodded, managing to smile for Mason's benefit. But inside me, something fundamental had shifted. The protective father who'd spent days praying for his son's recovery was still there. But he was now joined by something far more dangerous. A man who'd been betrayed by the two people he'd trusted most in the world. After Dr. Wells left, and Mason drifted back to sleep, I walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. 3 stories below, I could see my black Mercedes, the same car I'd driven frantically to the hospital 6 days ago when I'd still believed my world was intact. My phone, silent for the past 2 days, showed 17 missed calls from Linda and 4 from Trevor. I read through Linda's increasingly frantic voicemails, concern about my silence, then anger about missing the party, then attempts at manipulation about working through our problems. Trevor's messages were more direct. We need to talk. Linda told me what happened. This isn't what you think. Call me back, Vincent. I deleted every message without responding. Then I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in over a year, Anthony Russo, a private investigator who'd worked security details for some of my most demanding clients. Anthony specialized in cases that required absolute discretion and thoroughness. The call was answered on the second ring. Russo Investigations. Anthony, it's Vincent Morrison. I need to hire you for something personal. Vincent, of course. What do you need? Complete surveillance and background on 2 subjects. Financial records, communications, travel patterns, everything. I want to know what they've been doing, where they've been going, and who they've been talking to for the past year. Understood. Who are the subjects? I watched my reflection in the window glass, noting the cold determination in my own eyes. My wife, Linda Morrison, and my brother, Trevor Morrison. There was a pause. Anthony had worked with me long enough to know this wasn't a request made lightly. How deep do you want me to go? All the way to the bottom, Anthony. No limits, no boundaries. I want to know everything. You'll have preliminary findings within 48 hours. I ended the call and returned to Mason's bedside. My son was sleeping peacefully now, the color already returning to his cheeks. Whatever came next, I would make sure Mason was protected from all of it. But Linda and Trevor? They would face the full consequences of their choices. Vincent Morrison had built his reputation on understanding that every action had repercussions, and betrayal carried the highest price of all. The war was about to begin, and I intended to win completely. Anthony Russo's preliminary report arrived exactly 48 hours later, delivered by encrypted email to my secure business account. I read it in the hospital cafeteria during one of Mason's scheduled rest periods, and what I discovered made my blood turn to ice. The affair between Linda and Trevor had been going on for 14 months. Anthony had uncovered credit card records showing shared hotel visits, joint trips disguised as separate business travel, and hundreds of text messages between burner phones. But the details that cut deepest were the personal ones: intimate photos, love letters, and planning documents for what they'd apparently started calling their real life together. More damaging still were Trevor's financial records. My brother had been systematically embezzling from our family construction business, the company our father had built and left to both of us. Trevor had been siphoning money into offshore accounts, apparently planning to disappear with Linda once they'd accumulated enough to start fresh somewhere else. But the revelation that made my jaw clench with unadulterated fury was a recorded phone conversation Anthony had obtained from 3 weeks ago. Linda's voice was crystal clear. Once Vincent finds out about us, he'll probably try to take Mason away. We need to be prepared for that. Maybe it would be better if something happened to eliminate the custody issue entirely. Trevor's response had been just as chilling. You mean something permanent? I'm just saying accidents happen, especially to little boys who don't watch where they're going. I had to step outside the hospital, into the cold October air, to process what I had just read. My wife and brother hadn't just betrayed me. They had potentially orchestrated my own son's near-death experience. The accident that had nearly killed Mason might not have been an accident at all. I called Anthony immediately. I need surveillance recordings from the intersection where Mason was hit. Traffic cameras, security footage from nearby businesses, everything. Already working on it. I should have those files by tomorrow, Anthony replied. And Anthony, expand the investigation. I want to know everything about both of them. Debts, associates, weaknesses. Everything that could be useful. I spent the next 2 days maintaining a perfectly normal facade, all while meticulously building my case underneath. I continued caring for Mason, who was recovering remarkably well and would be discharged within the week. To any observer, I appeared to be nothing more than a devoted father, focused entirely on his son's health. But during Mason's sleeping hours and therapy sessions, I was meeting with lawyers, accountants, and other specialists. I consulted with Detective Ray Castellano, a former police investigator who now worked private cases for my security firm. Ray specialized in building airtight cases that could withstand any legal scrutiny. You want to be very careful here, Vincent, Ray warned during our meeting at a downtown diner. If you're right about them orchestrating the accident, we're talking about attempted murder of a child. That's not something you handle privately. I'm not interested in letting the courts handle this, Ray. I want them destroyed completely, but I want it done in a way that looks like natural consequences. Ray studied my face carefully. We'd worked together for 8 years, and he'd never seen this level of cold determination in me. What exactly are you planning? Trevor's been stealing from the family business. That stops now. and he pays back everything with interest. Linda wants a divorce? She'll get one, but she'll walk away with nothing. My voice dropped to a whisper that somehow sounded more threatening than any shout. And if they did engineer Mason's accident, then they'll understand what real consequences look like. The traffic camera footage arrived that evening. What it revealed confirmed my worst suspicions. The car that had struck Mason hadn't been speeding by accident. The driver had actually accelerated toward the crosswalk where Mason was crossing. More damning still, a license plate search revealed the vehicle was registered to a shell company that traced back to one of Trevor's business associates. I now had proof of attempted murder. But instead of taking the evidence to the police, I began planning something far more comprehensive. I spent the night drafting what I privately called the Trevor Protocol, a systematic plan to strip my brother of everything he valued, while exposing his crimes in the most publicly humiliating way possible. The plan had 3 phases. Phase 1 would target Trevor's finances and reputation within our shared business community. Phase 2 would destroy his relationship with Linda by revealing the extent of his criminal activities to her. Phase 3 would be the final reckoning, a confrontation that would leave Trevor with nothing but the crushing knowledge that his own actions had caused his downfall. For Linda, I had something even more personal in mind. She wanted to play games with our marriage? I would show her exactly what happened when someone tried to manipulate a man who understood power better than she ever could. On Mason's final day in the hospital, Linda finally appeared for what she claimed would be a family discussion. She arrived wearing a new designer dress and jewelry I didn't recognize, her manner combining false concern for Mason with barely concealed irritation at my continued silence. "We need to talk about us," she announced after giving Mason a perfunctory kiss on the forehead. "This silent treatment is childish." "Vincent, there is no us anymore." "Linda," my voice was calm, almost pleasant. "File for divorce whenever you want. My lawyer will be in touch with the settlement terms." Linda's eyes flashed with triumph, clearly believing she'd won. "Good. I was hoping you'd be reasonable about this." "Oh, I'm going to be very reasonable," I agreed, smiling in a way that didn't reach my eyes. "You'll find me extremely reasonable." As Linda left the hospital that afternoon, confident in her victory, she had no idea that Vincent Morrison had just declared war. And in war, I had never lost a single battle. I spent Mason's first week home from the hospital establishing the perfect facade of a man resigned to his fate. I hired Mrs. Eleanor Fitzgerald, a highly recommended private nurse, to help with Mason's recovery while I handled the divorce proceedings. To Linda, I appeared defeated, going through the motions of our separation with bitter acceptance. What Linda didn't know was that Mrs. Fitzgerald had previously worked security for my firm and was now documenting everything that happened in our home. Every conversation, every visitor, every phone call Linda made was being recorded through sophisticated surveillance equipment I had installed throughout the house. The recordings from just the first 3 days were devastating. Linda had invited Trevor over within hours of my giving up, and their conversations revealed the full scope of their plans. They discussed selling the house immediately, moving the offshore money to untraceable accounts, and starting fresh in Costa Rica, where they believed I couldn't touch them. But more damning were the details about Mason's accident. In a moment of drunken confidence, Trevor had boasted about how easy it had been to arrange. "Your boy getting hurt was the perfect excuse for Vincent to be out of the picture," he'd slurred. And if he'd been hurt worse, well, single mothers get a lot more sympathy than divorced wives. I listened to the recording 3 times, my hands steady despite the cold, burning rage inside me. They hadn't just betrayed me. They tried to murder my son for convenience. Whatever happened next, they had earned every moment of suffering I was about to deliver. The first phase of my plan launched during the second week. Trevor arrived at the Morrison construction offices Monday morning to find the locks changed and federal investigators waiting with a search warrant. I had provided them with detailed financial records showing the embezzlement, tax evasion, and fraud Trevor had been committing for over a year. "I don't understand." Trevor called me, panic clear in his voice. "Why would you turn me in? We're family." "You stopped being my family the moment you decided to steal from our father's company," I replied calmly. The FBI is very interested in your offshore accounts, by the way. Turns out hiding money from the IRS is still illegal. While Trevor scrambled to find lawyers and damage control, I was already implementing phase 2. I arranged for Linda to receive copies of Trevor's arrest records, his financial crimes documentation, and, most importantly, recordings of Trevor bragging about having other women in 3 different cities. Linda's call came within an hour of receiving the package. "Vincent, we need to talk. Something terrible has happened with Trevor." "I know all about Trevor," I said simply. "I've known for weeks." There was silence on the line. Then Linda's voice came back, smaller, more uncertain. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I know about the affair. I know about the embezzlement. I know about the accident." Each word was delivered with surgical precision. "I know everything, Linda. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You and my brother have been planning to destroy my family, steal my money, and move to Costa Rica. Unfortunately for both of you, I'm much better at this than you are." I could hear Linda's breathing becoming rapid and panicked. "What do you want?" "I want you to pack a suitcase and be out of my house by noon tomorrow. The divorce papers will grant you exactly what you deserve." "Nothing. You can keep whatever you can fit in that suitcase." "You can't do this. I have rights." "You had rights when you were my wife. You gave those up when you decided to have my son nearly killed for your convenience." My voice remained calm, but the words carried the weight of absolute finality. "Noon tomorrow, Linda. Don't be late." The next morning, I watched from Mason's bedroom window as Linda loaded 2 suitcases into her car. Her face was streaked with tears and fury. She kept looking up at the house, clearly hoping I would change my mind or come outside to negotiate. I didn't. Mason, propped up in bed reading, looked up at his father. "Is Mom really leaving forever?" "Yes, she is." "Are you sad?" I considered the question carefully. Was I sad? The man who'd loved Linda Hartwell was sad. But that man had died in a hospital room a week ago. The man who'd taken his place felt only cold satisfaction at seeing justice served. "No, buddy. I'm not sad. People who hurt our family don't get to stay in our family." Mason nodded seriously, wise beyond his 10 years. "Like Uncle Trevor?" "Exactly like Uncle Trevor." That afternoon, I received a call from Detective Castellano. "Trevor Morrison posted bail 2 hours ago. Word is he's been trying to contact Linda, but she's not answering her phone. She's probably figured out that he's been lying to her about everything else, too," I observed. "What's his next move likely to be?" "My guess? He's going to come looking for you. Men like your brother don't go down quietly, especially when they think they've been betrayed." I smiled grimly. "Good. I've been waiting for him to make that mistake. Because phase 3 of my plan required Trevor to come to me. And when he did, I would be ready to finish what he had started the day he decided that harming a child was an acceptable price for his greed. The final confrontation was coming, and Vincent Morrison intended to win it permanently. Trevor Morrison made his predictable move on a Thursday evening, just as I had calculated he would. Desperate, facing federal charges, and abandoned by Linda, he came to the family home looking for someone to blame for his downfall. I had been expecting him. Mrs. Fitzgerald had taken Mason to his grandmother's house for a sleepover, leaving me alone to handle what was coming. The security system I'd installed captured Trevor's arrival, drunk, angry, and carrying what appeared to be a baseball bat from his truck. I watched through the security monitors as Trevor stumbled up the front walkway, muttering to himself. The external microphones picked up fragments, ruined everything. My own brother should have finished the job. When Trevor started pounding on the front door, I was ready. "Vincent, open this door. We need to settle this like men." I opened the door calmly, noting Trevor's bloodshot eyes and the overpowering smell of alcohol. My younger brother had always been the volatile one, quick to anger and slower to think. That predictability had made planning this confrontation remarkably simple. "Hello, Trevor. You look terrible. You son of a bitch." Trevor raised the bat, but I was faster, stepping aside as his drunken swing left him off balance. I caught his wrist and twisted, sending the bat clattering across the entryway floor. "That was a mistake," I said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. Trevor stumbled backward, suddenly realizing he'd badly miscalculated. I had always been the bigger, stronger brother, but Trevor had forgotten that my security work kept me in peak physical condition. You destroyed my life, Trevor shouted. Linda was the best thing that ever happened to me. And you, I didn't do anything to your life, Trevor. You destroyed it yourself the moment you decided to steal from our father's company. I advanced slowly, forcing Trevor back toward the living room. I just made sure there were consequences. The money was as much mine as yours. The money you stole wasn't from the business profits, Trevor. You've been embezzling from client accounts. Money that belonged to other people. People who trusted us. My voice carried cold contempt. Our father built this company on integrity, and you turned it into your personal piggy bank. Trevor's face flushed with rage and shame. Dad always liked you better anyway. You got everything handed to you while I had to scrape for whatever scraps fell. Linda understood that. She saw how you treated me, how you always had to be the successful one, the perfect one. Linda understood that you were a useful idiot with access to money, I interrupted. She's been playing you for 14 months, Trevor. Every promise she made, every plan you thought you two had together, it was all manipulation. I pulled out my phone and played one of the recorded conversations from the previous week. Linda's voice filled the room. Trevor's so desperate to prove himself that he'll do anything I suggest. The money laundering, the offshore accounts, even arranging the accident. He actually thinks I respect him for it. Trevor's face went white as he heard his lover's words. That's a lie. You're lying. I played another recording, this one from just 3 days ago. I never loved Trevor. How could I? He's weak, criminal, and honestly not very bright. But he was useful for getting Vincent out of the picture. Once the divorce is final and I have my settlement, I'll disappear and let Trevor deal with his legal problems alone. Trevor sank into a chair, the fight going out of him as he realized the full scope of how thoroughly he'd been used. She said she loved me. She said we were going to start over together. She used you to steal money and try to kill my son, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences for that? The accident was her idea. I just arranged the car. I never wanted Mason to actually get hurt that badly. I went very still. You just confessed to attempted murder. Trevor looked up, sudden panic in his eyes as he realized what he'd just admitted. Vincent, you have to understand, I understand perfectly. I pulled out my phone again, this time showing Trevor that our entire conversation had been recorded. I understand that you and Linda conspired to have my 10-year-old son killed for money. Trevor tried to stand, but I was already moving. Years of protection work had taught me how to restrain dangerous individuals efficiently and permanently. Trevor found himself face down on the hardwood floor, my knee pressed against his spine. Here's what's going to happen, I said calmly, ignoring Trevor's struggles. You're going to prison for embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion, and attempted murder. You'll serve 15 to 20 years if you're lucky. You can't prove the murder attempt. I have recordings of you confessing. I have financial records of you paying the driver. I have traffic camera footage of the accident. And now I have you confessing again on tape. I applied slightly more pressure and Trevor gasped. I can prove everything. I stood up, leaving Trevor gasping on the floor. But here's the thing, Trevor. Prison is just the beginning. You tried to kill my son, and that means you've made an enemy who will never, ever forget. What do you mean? I smiled, and Trevor finally understood the true danger he was in. This wasn't the protective older brother he'd grown up with. This was someone far more dangerous. A man with resources, connections, and an absolute commitment to revenge. I mean that for the rest of your life. Wherever you go, whatever you try to build, I'll be there to tear it down. Every job you apply for, every relationship you start, every moment of peace you think you've found, I'll be there to remind the world exactly what you are. Trevor tried to crawl away, but I caught his ankle. And Trevor, Linda's going to face the same justice. She's already discovered that all her credit cards have been canceled, her bank accounts frozen, and her passport flagged. She's trapped, alone, and about to learn what happens to people who threaten my family. As I called the police to report an intruder who'd confessed to attempted murder, Trevor Morrison finally understood that he had declared war on the wrong man, and this war was about to end with his complete and permanent destruction. The next 3 weeks unfolded exactly as I had orchestrated. Trevor was denied bail after the recording of his confession was presented to the court, and Linda found herself trapped in a legal nightmare that stripped away every advantage she'd thought she possessed. My lawyer, Rebecca Cross, was a specialist in high-stakes divorce cases who took particular satisfaction in destroying manipulative spouses. She'd reviewed all of my evidence and constructed a legal strategy that would leave Linda with nothing, while ensuring she faced criminal charges for her role in Mason's attempted murder. She's trying to claim she was coerced by Trevor, Rebecca informed me during our meeting. Her attorney is arguing that she was a victim of manipulation and had no real involvement in the criminal conspiracy. I smiled coldly. Show them the recordings from last Tuesday. Rebecca played the audio file I had provided, Linda's conversation with a man named Carlos Mendez, whom she'd been secretly meeting while supposedly devastated about her marriage's end. In the recording, Linda was clearly planning to access hidden assets and flee the country once the heat died down. I love how she thought she was so clever, Rebecca observed, trying to play the victim while secretly planning her escape. The prosecution is going to have a field day with this. Linda's attempts to claim innocence collapsed when faced with the overwhelming evidence I had accumulated. The recordings of her planning Mason's accident, her knowledge of Trevor's embezzlement, and her attempts to hide assets all painted a picture of a woman who was far from the victim she claimed to be. But my revenge went deeper than just legal consequences. I'd used my network of contacts to ensure that Linda's reputation was destroyed throughout their entire social circle. The country club expelled her for moral turpitude. Her closest friends received anonymous packages containing transcripts of her most damning recorded conversations. Every bridge she'd ever built was systematically burned. The coup de grace came when I arranged for Linda's own family to learn the truth about her character. Her cousin Belle, the same cousin whose birthday party had triggered Linda's divorce threat, received copies of recordings where Linda mocked Belle as a pathetic spinster who throws elaborate parties because she has no real life. Within a week, Linda found herself completely isolated, facing serious criminal charges and financially destitute. Her desperate attempts to contact me for mercy went unanswered. I was focused entirely on Mason's continued recovery and the rebuilding of our lives. My son was thriving, both physically and emotionally, and had shown remarkable resilience in the face of everything that had happened. Dad, do you think Uncle Trevor is sorry for what he did? Mason asked one evening as we worked on a puzzle together. I considered the question carefully. I think Trevor is sorry he got caught, buddy. But being sorry you got caught is different from being sorry you hurt someone. Mason nodded thoughtfully. Like when kids at school say sorry, but they don't really mean it. Exactly like that. I'm glad he's gone, Mason said quietly. And I'm glad Mom is gone too. They made everything feel scared and angry all the time. I felt a surge of protective love for my son. Despite everything Mason had endured, he was becoming a stronger, more perceptive child. The trauma hadn't broken him. It had revealed his inner strength. The final courtroom scenes played out with devastating efficiency. Trevor was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. The judge specifically noted the calculated cruelty of targeting a child for financial gain. Linda received 12 years for conspiracy and accessory charges, though I suspected she'd serve the full sentence. Prison had a way of being particularly harsh to people who harmed children, and word had a way of spreading about what inmates were inside for. As I watched them both being led away in shackles, I felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only a cold sense of completion. Justice had been served. Consequences had been delivered, and the threats to my family had been permanently eliminated. But Trevor made one final mistake. As he was being escorted from the courtroom, he looked directly at me and mouthed words that the security cameras would later clearly capture. This isn't over. I smiled. Then, the first genuine emotion I'd shown in months flickered across my face. Because Trevor still didn't understand who he was dealing with. Even from prison, Trevor apparently thought he could continue to threaten my family. That night, I made a phone call to contacts who specialized in ensuring that prison could be a very educational experience for inmates who needed to learn important lessons about consequences. Trevor Morrison would discover that my reach extended far beyond the courtroom and that some wars never truly end. They just move to different battlefields. Trevor Morrison's first month in federal prison taught him several important lessons. The most significant was that his older brother's influence extended far beyond the civilian world he'd known. It started with small things. His commissary orders consistently arrived incomplete or spoiled. His cell assignments kept changing, always to locations with problematic cellmates. Guards seemed to lose his request forms and forget to relay his messages. Mail delivery became sporadic at best. But the real education began when Trevor was approached by Marcus Webb, a lifer who controlled most of the prison's internal economy. Marcus was a soft-spoken man whose quiet demeanor masked a ruthlessly efficient intelligence network. Trevor Morrison, Marcus said during their first conversation in the prison yard. "You're the one who tried to have a kid killed for money." Trevor tried to appear confident. "I don't know what you're talking about." Marcus smiled patiently. "See, that's interesting, because I have some friends on the outside who told me all about you. How you worked with that woman to arrange for a 10-year-old boy to get hit by a car. How you did it for money and a piece of tail that didn't even respect you. Who told you that? Let's just say your brother has friends in interesting places." Marcus's smile never wavered. "And those friends want to make sure everyone here understands exactly what kind of man you are." The conversation was a revelation for Trevor. I hadn't just destroyed his life legally. I'd arranged for Trevor's imprisonment to be a daily reminder of the consequences of his choices. Every day brought new humiliations, new demonstrations that, even behind bars, my reach was absolute. Meanwhile, Linda was learning similar lessons in the women's federal facility 3 states away. Her attempts to maintain her appearance and social status were systematically undermined by accidents and oversights that left her looking haggard and desperate. But my true masterstroke came 6 months into their sentences. Through carefully orchestrated channels, both Trevor and Linda received the same message. Vincent Morrison had adopted a new identity and disappeared with Mason, leaving no forwarding address. They would serve their full sentences knowing that when they were released, they would never be able to find or threaten my family again. The message was a lie, of course. Mason and I had simply moved to a new house in a different part of town and continued our lives. But the psychological impact on Trevor and Linda was devastating. They faced the next 11 years knowing that their crimes had not only destroyed their freedom, but it also permanently severed any possibility of finding Vincent and Mason when they were released. Trevor's breaking point came 8 months into his sentence. During a supervised phone call, he managed to reach one of my old business numbers. "Vincent, please, I'm begging you. I've learned my lesson. I'm sorry for everything, Trevor." My voice was calm, almost pleasant. "I'm surprised to hear from you. Please, you have to call off whatever you've arranged in here. I can't take much more of this." "Call off what?" "I haven't arranged anything, Trevor. What you're experiencing are just the natural consequences of your choices. People know what I did to Mason. They know about the accident. Of course they do. Attempted child murder is public record. I'm not responsible for how other inmates react to that information." Trevor was crying now, all pretense of dignity abandoned. "I'll do anything. I'll sign over everything. I'll admit to whatever you want. Just please, Trevor. You already confessed to everything on tape. You already signed over everything when the court seized your assets. There's nothing left for you to offer me. Then what do you want?" My voice dropped to the quiet, dangerous tone Trevor had learned to fear. "I want you to serve every single day of your sentence, knowing that you tried to murder my son for money. I want you to wake up every morning and go to sleep every night, remembering that your greed and weakness nearly killed a 10-year-old boy. Vincent, please. And I want you to understand that when you're eventually released, you'll be a registered felon with no money, no family, no friends, and no future. You'll spend the rest of your life knowing that you destroyed everything good you ever had for a woman who never respected you and money you were too stupid to enjoy." The line went dead, and Trevor Morrison finally understood that his war with Vincent had been over before it started. He'd brought a knife to a gunfight, and I had spent months ensuring that the defeat would be permanent and complete. In her own facility, Linda received a similar call that same day. Her conversation with me lasted exactly 90 seconds and ended with her screaming threats and obscenities into a disconnected phone line. That night, both Trevor and Linda learned that threatening Vincent Morrison's family, even from prison, carried additional consequences. The next morning, they were both transferred to maximum security facilities, where communication with the outside world became almost impossible. I set down my phone and returned to helping Mason with his homework. My son was excelling in his new school, making friends easily, and showing no signs of lasting trauma from his ordeal. "Dad, was that Uncle Trevor on the phone?" Mason asked without looking up from his math problems. "Yes, it was." "Did he say he was sorry?" I considered the question. "He said the words, but they didn't mean anything. Some people only say sorry when they want something, not because they actually feel bad about what they did." Mason nodded seriously. "I'm glad we don't have to see him anymore." "You never will," I assured him. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. As I looked at my son, healthy, happy, and safe, I felt complete satisfaction with the choices I'd made. Justice had been served, consequences had been delivered, and the future belonged entirely to him and me. The war was over, and I had won it completely. 2 years after the trials, I stood in the kitchen of our new home, watching Mason play basketball in the backyard with his best friend, Jake. At 12, Mason had grown tall and strong, with no physical limitations from his injuries, and a maturity that impressed every adult who met him. The house was smaller than our previous home, but it felt infinitely more peaceful. I had chosen the location carefully, a quiet neighborhood with good schools and neighbors who valued privacy. I'd also implemented security measures that were invisible but comprehensive, ensuring that Mason would always be safe without feeling like he lived in a fortress. Dr. Sarah Chun, Mason's therapist, had pronounced him remarkably well-adjusted during their final session the previous month. "He's processed the trauma in a very healthy way," she told me. "Children are often more resilient than we expect, especially when they have a strong support system." I had built that support system carefully. Mrs. Fitzgerald had become like family, serving as both caregiver and confidant for Mason. My mother had moved closer and spent several days a week with her grandson. A circle of trusted friends and neighbors provided additional layers of security and normalcy. The construction business had been rebuilt from the ground up under my sole control. All of Trevor's contamination had been methodically removed, and the company now operated with an integrity that would have made our father proud. I had hired Detective Ray Castellano as head of security, and the business had expanded into corporate consulting with impressive success. But the most significant change was in me. The man who had emerged from the hospital ICU 2 years ago was harder than the man who had entered it. But I was also more focused on what truly mattered. I'd learned to distinguish between people who deserved my trust and those who merely demanded it. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I opened it to find Detective Ray Castellano holding a manila envelope. "Thought you'd want to see this," Ray said, stepping into the house. I opened the envelope and found photographs from federal prison surveillance cameras. Trevor looked haggard and thin, his face bearing scars that suggested his imprisonment had been exactly as educational as I had intended. In the photos, he was being transferred to another facility, this time a minimum security prison farm in a remote location. "He's been reclassified as a model prisoner," Ray explained. "Apparently, he's found religion and spends most of his time in the prison library." I studied the photos without emotion. "How much time does he have left?" 8 years, assuming good behavior. "Linda has about 7 left on her sentence." I nodded and placed the photos back in the envelope. "Any word on their post-release plans?" Trevor's been writing letters to his old army buddies, talking about starting fresh somewhere far away. Linda's apparently planning to move in with her sister in Oregon once she's released. Both of them seem to understand that returning to this area would be inadvisable. Good. I sealed the envelope and handed it back to Ray. "File this with the others. I don't need to see any more updates unless they try to make contact." Ray understood. I had moved beyond the need for ongoing revenge into the more important work of building a secure future for my son. The past was settled. What mattered now was ensuring that the future remained protected. That evening, as I helped Mason with his algebra homework, my son looked up with a question that had clearly been on his mind for a while. Dad, do you ever think about what would have happened if Uncle Trevor and Mom had been different people? I sat down my pen and considered the question seriously. What do you mean? Like, if they had been good people who loved us and never tried to hurt anyone, do you think we'd still be a family? It was a profound question for a 12-year-old, and I realized that Mason was grappling with concepts of family, loyalty, and forgiveness that many adults never fully understood. I think good people who loved us wouldn't have made the choices they made, I said carefully. Real love means protecting the people you care about, not hurting them for your own benefit. Mason nodded thoughtfully. So they showed us who they really were by what they did. Exactly. And now we know to build our family with people who show us through their actions that they can be trusted, like Mrs. Fitzgerald and Grandma and Uncle Ray. I smiled. Ray had become like a brother to both of us, filling the role that Trevor had abandoned. Mrs. Fitzgerald had proven more maternal than Linda had ever been. My mother had stepped up as the grandmother Mason deserved. Exactly like them. Family isn't just about blood relations, Mason. It's about people who choose to love and protect each other no matter what. Mason returned to his homework with the satisfied expression of someone who'd received an answer that made sense of his world. I watched him work, marveling at the strength and wisdom my son had developed through adversity. Later that night, after Mason was asleep, I sat in my study, reviewing security reports and business documents. The ritual had become both a practical necessity and a personal meditation, a way of ensuring that the peaceful life we built remained protected. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your brother says hello from his new home. Asks if you've forgotten about him yet. I deleted the message without responding. Someone, probably one of Trevor's fellow inmates, was trying to goad me into some kind of reaction. It was exactly the kind of desperate, pathetic move Trevor would orchestrate from prison. I had not forgotten about Trevor, and I never would. But forgetting and moving on were two different things. Trevor Morrison would serve every day of his sentence, knowing that his choices had permanent consequences. When he was eventually released, he would discover that my reach was long enough to ensure those consequences continued for the rest of his life. But Vincent Morrison had more important things to focus on than managing the misery of people who had forfeited the right to his consideration. I had a son to raise, a business to run, and a future to build. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, I felt the deep satisfaction of a man who had faced the worst betrayal imaginable and emerged stronger. I'd learned that forgiveness was a luxury I couldn't always afford, and that some wounds were meant to leave scars as reminders. Mason was safe, our enemies were neutralized, and our future was secure. In Vincent Morrison's world, that was the only victory that mattered. The war was over, and I had won it completely. Ending asterisk so, Mason and I built our new beginning from the ashes of betrayal. A new home, a new family forged by choice and loyalty, not just blood. Every day, we live with the quiet understanding that while some battles leave lasting scars, true strength comes from protecting what matters most. Call to action asterisk I've told you my story of unthinkable betrayal and how I chose to fight back. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in my shoes, faced with such a horrific act against your child, what would your ultimate act of justice look like? Let me know in the comments below, asterisk asterisk.